Trackmania is mainly known by the wider public as a competitive racing game. Some people even go as far as calling it the most competitive racing game. However, I will try to not talk about the racing aspects of this franchise today. Over the years of different Trackmania game releases, we received a bunch of game modes that offered much more than simple racing for the fastest time. In Trackmania United Forever from 2008, we had 4 main and most popular game modes. In the race mode, you would just play the tracks as fast as possible, and achieving the best time was the only goal, exactly as you could expect. In the platform mode, the player had to face a series of very difficult tracks where the goal was to finish with as few fails as possible. Every time the driver had to resort to respawning back to the checkpoint, it would increase the counter on the bottom of the screen. Keeping the counter at 0 while crossing the finish would equal to a perfect run. However, as the skill level of the drivers in the community increased, finishing maps without any respawns would usually not be a challenge anymore, and the platform campaign eventually turned into another race campaign, where people would just try to beat maps with the best times. Only difference being that the maps are weirder and more demanding. Another mode was the puzzle mode, where after opening the map, the player would be taken to the map editor. The goal here is to first build your own track with a limited set of blocks and then compete for the fastest time. The added aspect of spending your time to figure out how to connect blocks in the best way possible was surely interesting, but the moment the best solution was leaked to the public, everyone would just build identical solutions and the puzzle maps would once again turn into nothing more but a racing challenge. So far, even despite completely different concepts, every game mode could be somehow reduced to just a simple principle. Try to finish the map as quickly as you can. The last game mode I want to talk about is going to break that rule. The goals of the stunt mode are completely different. Right after opening a stunt track, your timer, instead of starting from 0 and increasing, would be decreasing starting from a set time value. The driver has to reach the finish before the timer reaches 0, and as the game mode's name suggests, in that time span you have to do the best stunts with your car that you can imagine. Each of the jumps will reward the driver with stunt points, and the more you have, the better your score is. As a kid, I really loved the concept of just flying around and doing cool tricks, and I would basically spend all my time in Trackmania playing the stunt maps. Now this game mode never became very popular, and there are few problems that probably caused it. First of all, apart from the things I have already told you, the game would not provide any additional help about what you are supposed to do. Each time you finish a jump of some sort, a name of the trick would appear on your screen and you would be informed about the points you received for that stunt. But how do you actually perform these tricks? What are the differences? Is it better to spend a lot of time in the air, or is it better to spin your car a lot? What the hell does 3 times chain straight freestyle 360 even mean? You literally have no idea, and at the time I started playing the stunt mode, I believe most of the players also had no idea. It would all come down to just experience. After playing for a longer while, you would start noticing some patterns. You would slowly start to understand which tricks give the most points and how to perform them, but for a newcomer, it would all be just a black magic. Let's jump to the year 2011. At that time, I was already a pretty experienced stunt player with hundreds of hours of practice, but a lot of my knowledge would still be based just on my intuition, rather than on pure theory and information. Still, I wanted to find out one thing that was bothering me. What is the best stunt score that you can achieve? The answer to that question is actually very simple. It depends on how much time you have. While building a stunt map, you can decide what the time limit will be, and if you put some kind of a huge number out there, you will find out that there is no protection against it. It is even possible to jump to negative time values if you put numbers big enough that the time variable will overflow. So in theory, you could build a track that consists of just 2 quarter pipe ramps and repeat the same stunt for hundreds of hours, probably getting a really gigantic stunt score. Obviously nobody would want to play the same map non-stop for several weeks, so I decided to adjust my idea a bit. I chose a realistic time limit of 20 minutes and decided to build a track that would allow the player to get a really huge stunt score. Here is where I had to do a little bit of planning. Now I don't want to spend hours trying to explain everything I know about stunt mode, but we need some complete basics. The first rule of this stunt mode is to not repeat the same type of stunts. Repeating the same stunt over and over again adds a multiplier that lowers the points you received each consecutive time. This is why the idea of just placing 2 quarter pipes would not be very efficient. After a while you would barely be gaining points anymore. In total there are 20 unique stunt types you can make, so ideally you would just want to get one very high scoring stunt of each type. In practice, some of these stunts have much bigger potential due to the better base score they have, and some others barely give points even if you execute them perfectly. The 3 premium stunts that we will focus on are Flipping Mix, Spinning Chaos and Rolling Madness. I will not go into detail on how you perform them because that's just way too complicated, but knowing the names at least will be helpful. The second rule of stunt mode is to keep your chain. Chain is a multiplier that increases your points when you start doing a new stunt shortly after landing a previous one. To know for sure that you are not losing the chain, you have to look at the stunt names that appear on your screen. The moment that the name disappears, you know that the chain is lost. If you have all your wheels on the ground at that moment, you lose the chain, therefore losing a very useful multiplier. If you started doing a new stunt already and that's when the name disappears from the screen, you are good to go, because the chain will increase. The craziest thing is that it's not explained anywhere in the game and it's not intuitional at all. Either you notice that this is how it works, or you might be losing chain thinking it's random. Also, one more thing, the more points you get for a jump, the longer the stunt text will stay on the screen. It wouldn't be a huge issue for me as I was planning to do some very high scoring jumps anyway. The third rule of the stunt mode, the bigger rotation and the longer airtime, the better. The question arises, which of these are more valuable, and the answer is, I have no idea. I would say it's pretty situational. Usually you want to pay attention to both. Sometimes more rotation is not better as you also want to land your tricks in a way that would allow you to continue driving easily, and sometimes more airtime is not great as you might want to land quicker to have time to make more stunts later on. There are also some other things that are important, but on this stage of planning the map, they are not that impactful. Trackmania United Forever has 7 different environments that you can play on, each one of them having different cars with unique physics and a different set of blocks with scenery surrounding the track. The vanilla game does not let you mix the environments together and you can't simply play a stadium car on snow environment using desert blocks. However, in 2010, in some mysterious way, the player mixed, created base maps that have all combinations of cars in different environments. These base maps would still be playable in regular game, and they were commonly used to build tracks with some very unique combinations. I have decided to pick one of these mixed templates for my record-breaking track to achieve the most promising mix. It was pretty obvious to me which environment I am going to pick: Stadium. There is one thing that distinguishes Stadium from all the other environments. Once you reach the edge of the driving area on any of the environments, the car starts falling into a bottomless pit, on every environment except for Stadium. If you zoom out the camera really far away, you will notice that the Stadium area is actually located in a gigantic sphere, and interestingly enough, the bottom of that sphere can actually be reached. It takes roughly 1 minute of falling while holding your acceleration before you reach the end and land your jump. This was obviously a huge opportunity for me. I could fly my stunts outside of the stadium area, fall down for a long while, get a gigantic stunt score due to very long airtime, and then respawn back to any checkpoint and possibly repeat the same thing again, extending my stunt score. As I said, Stadium was an obvious choice for the surroundings, but now I also had the possibility of picking the car that I wanted to play with. Luckily, this was also a simple choice as there was already one car that became a symbol of high-scoring stunt trucks. The coast environment is mostly known for rather slow-paced technical tracks. Coast car accelerates slowly and it very easily starts sliding if the turning radius is too harsh. In the stunt mode, everything changes thanks to an interesting discovery. If you are met with a big area filled with boosters, the fastest way to cross them is to turn 180 degrees into backwards position and then start wiggling your car slightly left and right. This way, the car will very quickly start building up speed up to 500. Going backwards also gives you another benefit. Since you are basically non-stop sliding, the car is able to very quickly turn around its own center of mass. Thanks to that, if you do a very sharp steering movement at the end of a ramp, you are able to leave it with an incredibly fast spinning movement, and as I mentioned, rotation is one of the key elements of the stunt mode. Coast car in the stadium environment. This was my choice for the record-breaking track. Now I could finally start building something. Most of the stunt tracks played competitively start with a short press forward section. This has two purposes. First of all, it lets you build up the chain to make all your later stunts more high scoring. Secondly, the initial points that you received while holding the forward key will increase the chain duration, making it easier to keep it going throughout the entire map. I thought it would be useful for my track as well, so I built a press forward section that starts with a booster staircase. Each drop grants you a basic jump, which is just a jump with zero rotation in all three axes. After getting the chain up to ×5, I placed a bounce that flipped the car backwards, granting the first real stunt of the track, which was an almost 400 points worth rodeo. Two more basic jumps and a roof hit that put the car into another flipping jump, this time a backflip. In total that leaves us with just under 600 points and ×10 chain. It's cool to just hold one key and see your car do all the jump by itself, but now it was time to take control. I built the rest of the track similarly as I would build any other stunt track. First we start with a quarter pipe jump. Usually on these ramps you can do either an aerial or an alley-oop, but here due to the low speed you can slightly lose the grip before taking off, and that results in different types of rotation, ultimately giving you a spin-off. Soon after landing, you can do a double spin combo that takes you towards another quarter pipe ramp. Now here, you can choose whether you want to do an aerial or an alley-oop. The only difference is that for one of them, you rotate in the same direction that you fly, and for the other, you rotate in the opposite direction. The next trick you are supposed to do is a flipping mix. It is also possible to do all sorts of different tricks here, but this is one of the easiest to do, and it is also worth a ton of points. In a test run I did while editing the video, it granted me over 600 points. For comparison, this is as much as an average 50 seconds long rally stunt track can give, as it is probably the worst environment for the stunt mode. With a coast car, you could easily do that with a single stunt. Anyway, back on the track, now it's time to do the last quarter pipe jump. Again, an aerial or alley-oop, but this time you do the one that was not done before, as repeating the same stunt would not be as valuable. This is a moment where you cross the only checkpoint of the map and enter the final section, still with 18.5 minutes left. This is finally where all the magic is going to happen. The 2500 points that were gathered so far were about to get pushed into the shadows, as this was a moment for the first jump into the void. I mentioned that falling down all the way to the bottom takes roughly 1 minute, but this is only if you are holding acceleration. If you release all the steering, it is going to take between 3 to 5 minutes for a single trick. This is not going to be a very intense run whatsoever. Most of the time will be spent looking at the white screen, waiting for the car to hit the ground, and then quickly pressing enter to return to the checkpoint and get ready for another jump. But the goal was not to make a fun track, the goal was to beat a record. And already after landing the first stunt I knew if there was some kind of a record before, it must have just gotten annihilated, as I scored over 4000 points with a single jump. This type of score has always been seen only as a final result on some of the longer tracks, but not with a single stunt. What's funny is that usually the rotation of the car ends simply because it reaches the ground. Here the car has so much airtime that it eventually stops rotating just because of the air resistance. At least that's what I think it is, not sure if it makes sense, but a lot of other things I'm showing you today also don't make much sense. Anyway, after repeating the huge jump a few times, the timer finally ran out and I had to cross the finish line, getting a score of 19,968 points. I was pretty proud of myself as I created a monster of a truck, but sadly it never got very popular, and for a good reason. It was ugly, it was way too long to be played online, and most importantly, it was awfully boring to play. In June 2011, the month when I posted the map online, it was only tried out by few players. Most notably, a player Killerweed improved my initial score to 21,283 points, and I also improved my score to 21,294 points, just 11 points ahead. Everything about the map remained the same, except for a better execution of some tricks, which resulted in single stunts worth even over 6,000 points. There was no reason to keep on pushing the boundaries. I had the world record that I was satisfied with on the most high-scoring truck that was built at the time. The map got forgotten for a while, until someone decided to bring it to life once again. We are moving in time to December 2012, roughly 1.5 years after the map's initial release. I woke up and noticed a comment on the Trucks page from my friend and a fellow stunt player, Ziperke. He decided to organize a competition on this track lasting from 12 December 2012 to 12 January 2013. In the time span of 1 month, only this single track would be played on a special server, and the best stunt score at the deadline would be rewarded with in-game currency amount equal to the points achieved. I already knew all the tricks for this track, so right away I started the attempts to improve my previous personal best record. Sadly, barely any information about the contest and record progression can be found nowadays, because this server simply does not exist for a long time, and all the links to screenshots are dead by now. I managed to find one screenshot on the Wayback Machine where I have almost 21,000 points, still with over 4 minutes left on the clock, while the best online score at that moment was just under 20,000 points, done by Ziperke. From what I remember, the run from the screenshot ended with over 25,000 points as the final score, which improved my PB by 4,000, a pretty significant amount. I was really happy with this score and so confident that it will be enough to stay in first place for the entire month, that I even said that I will give an additional 5,000 in-game currency to whoever beats it. In the meantime, I decided to play something else while waiting for the contest to end to get my reward. Unfortunately, it was not as simple as I expected. Three days have passed since my world record run, and I noticed that I have a new comment under my track. It said, Dragon just made 29,758. Dragon was a player from an old stunt team, Fire, and it looked like he was very interested in winning the prize as well. That got me really surprised, since I was sure my record was about to stay for the entire month. Not only it got beaten, but also by a landslide. I was absolutely clueless. At first I thought he must have just gotten incredibly lucky. After all, Stunt Mode is very complex and you have to watch for a lot of different factors, especially on a long map like this. Maybe the stars just aligned perfectly and he got 1 in a million attempt? Very quickly I realized that it's not the case, as the next day when I returned to the server, Dragon was sitting in first place with 84,000 points. I simply couldn't believe that. I even asked him to show his replay file, or else I would consider it to be cheated. On top of that, Ziperke also improved his record. I couldn't find the exact score he had, but I remember it to be around the 60,000 mark. Now it was obvious that the contest organizer would not be cheating, and anyway I knew Dragon for some time already and knew that he is a legit skilled player. So I was sitting on a server trying different things without success, until together with another player, Shocker, we decided to try an interesting idea. You see, there is a small issue with the environment mixing base tracks. Since it was never intended to be implemented by the game developers, the mixes are not really optimized to work perfectly. As an example, if you try to build a truck with a snow car on island environment, your wheels will be stuck in the ground, because the spawn point of island car is placed much lower than for the snow car. This can also be seen with the coast car on Stadium, but here, instead of getting stuck in the block completely, the car gets ejected upwards from the block, resulting in a small jump. This small jump would happen on every respawn to the checkpoint block on this track. The idea we had was weird. What if you just keep on respawning, getting lots of these small jumps to build up the chain to a higher value than usual? We started experimenting and the results were very promising. I quickly improved my record to 29,000 points and Shocker got a 37,000 points record. It turns out that Dragon and Zipperka had the exact same idea 2 days prior, and this is how they got these gigantic scores. The map has suddenly completely changed, as now everyone interested in winning the competition was testing the new respawn trick, which got named the Dragon Trick, in honor of the player. It quickly got really ridiculous, as it seemed that you get the best outcomes with 600 chain multiplier. Yes, people were really just sitting and pressing the enter key 600 times. Doing that would take roughly 7 minutes. 7 minutes of looking at your car just hopping up and down while pressing a single key. This was the new meta on the track. Zipperka was the first person to cross the 100,000 points mark, but I was determined to get my world record back. The Dragon Trick also changed everything that you should do before reaching the checkpoint. Each respawn would cost 50 points, while only giving a few points in exchange for the basic jump. After respawning for 600 times, your score would simply just go down to 0. That means that doing any stunts before the Dragon Trick was pointless, and you wanted to reach the checkpoint as quickly as possible. There was no reason to go through the press forward at the start, so you could just conveniently drop down to the later section of the map. On the quarter pipes, you just wanted to get to the other side. Going for any rotation was just a waste of time. Instead of doing a big flipping mix, you could just jump to the end, also skipping the quarter pipe jump. If you did all of these, you would easily save around 1 minute, which you could spend on respawning or doing more tricks with the big chain multiplier. With all my new knowledge, I started a next series of attempts. On one of them, I reached the checkpoint in just under a minute and began with the respawns. 6 minutes and 45 seconds later, I reached the 600 chain and started going for the actual tricks. The first stunt I did was pretty trash. What I got was 800 points rolling crack, 500 points twister and 900 points spin off. With these 3 garbage tricks I already scored 2000 points. This filled me with hope and I went for a real banger next. I jumped towards the void and waited for the results. After over 3 minutes of falling, I landed a corkscrew that gave me a whopping 33,000 points. With a single stunt I received more points than my old world record had in total just a few days ago. I still had a lot of time to spare, and after another long flight, I landed a spinning chaos for additional 33,000 points boost. For the next void stunts, I would start holding the acceleration key in the air to reach the landing sooner and squeeze some more stunt types before the timer runs out. I got a 13,000 points freestyle, 12,000 points flipping mix, and then for the remaining time, I would just do a few more stunts inside the stadium area. This ended up with 105,786 points in total, and that was enough to jump back to the first position. The whole map was already pretty boring when the competition started, but now it was taken to a whole nother level. I remember that around New Year's Eve of 2012 I was sick at home with a high fever, so I had plenty of time to play the track. If my parents saw me back then sitting in front of my monitor, pressing one key repeatedly and looking mindlessly at the screen where nothing was happening, they would probably think that I got some kind of a brain damage. Anyway, this was still not the end, as all the previously mentioned players were also trying to improve their scores. I couldn't let them take the victory from me, so I've decided to slightly adjust my strategy. I got better at the route to the checkpoint and managed to get there in only 40 seconds. Now I decided to torture myself even more than before, and instead of going for 600 chain, I went all the way to 984 in the span of 11 minutes. I can't remember why I stopped at this number in particular, but it was probably a result of a lot of trial and error. The real part of the run had started. I only had 8.5 minutes to do my stunts, so they had to be planned carefully. First, I went for a big spin with full acceleration on the drop down. After 1 minute of falling, I received 22,000 points. I respawned back to the checkpoint and went for a spinning chaos, this time with no acceleration during the drop. 3 more minutes have passed and I landed the stunt, getting unbelievable 52,000 points for that single jump. On my next respawn, something funny happens. Because of the respawn, the game does not have a correct reference point for the starting position of the jump. Some of the values from the state before the respawn must be placed there incorrectly, as a result, sometimes granting you a random stunt instead of a basic jump. Right here I received 500 points for a master roll that I did not do. Pretty helpful. At this point I did not have time for another long void jump, so I had to hold the acceleration if I wanted to land on time. The stunt I did was a 19,000 points rolling madness. I landed a few more tricks inside the stadium area and then realized that I still didn't get a flipping mix in my run. It is one of the most precious stunts you can get, so I had to get one for a big points gain. I used an unusual setup for that. I started with some rolling rotation, but only to crash into the concrete edge upside down to change that into the flipping rotation towards the void. I got another 19,000 points for the flipping mix, and then with less than 30 seconds left on the timer, I could only do one more stunt inside the stadium zone. I landed my last jump of the run and went towards the finish with a final score of 130,043 points. I can't remember what kind of scores other players had, but I remember the fight for the win was rather close. Eventually, the entire month passed, the competition ended, and I managed to stay in first place with my score. It's probably not a big surprise that just as the competition ended, nobody was interested in playing the map anymore. But making a popular track was not the main goal right from the start. The goal was to break a record, and that was surely accomplished. Sadly, I have to admit, with all the new strategies that were developed during the contest, anyone could probably create something more suitable with little effort. Well, it might be a bit disappointing, but nobody ever did. After 13 years, this could still be the world record. I searched through the Trackmania exchange, which is the database for Trackmania's user-built tracks, and my map is currently the second longest stunt track uploaded. The only longer track is a 34 minutes long press-forward map that ends with 100,000 points flat. So my track still scores higher despite not being as long. I found some other sizable stunt tracks where the dragon trick can be used. Here, for example, I doubled the old world record, because even with a time limit of only 5 minutes, I managed to hop my way up to 300 chain. Maybe someday someone very patient will decide to build an improved and extended version of my idea, but for now, this is where the tale ends. Trackmania is full of amazing stories, and new ones are being created every day. So if you enjoyed the video and want to see more Trackmania content in the future, you can support me by subscribing or even by getting channel membership if you are feeling generous. This is everything I wanted to show you. Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to the channel supporters. Have a nice day, goodbye.